Almost killed myself in college, had a date in the calendar, had a plan, knew exactly how I was gonna do it to make it look like an accident. Because when you're in that much pain, you think nothing could fix it. You think you're fundamentally broken. You become so I, me. All you want is the pain to stop. Anything must be better than this, so let me just close the curtain and turn this show off. And when my mom called, I realized, oh, if I do this, doing what I had planned to do would have been like putting on a suicide bomber vest, walking into a room of all the people I care most about and detonating.
It's crazy how many kids go through this shit.
Yeah, it's awful. I think the best way to help the self is to escape the self sometimes. Not by doing coke, not by getting plastered every night, but by doing what we're evolved to do, which is spend time with other people, right? Doing things, not just like sitting there in a circle like AA talking about all your worries and pains, even though AA is actually a spectacular organization and format. It's incredibly impressive, but you don't necessarily have to do that. You can just be a bunch of dudes sitting around a fire, not making eye contact, making fart jokes and talking about hunting. Like, that's fine. That's actually incredibly therapeutic. It's like people process things in different ways. It doesn't have to be like, not everyone has to do it the same way.
Yeah.
So those are a few thoughts, but yeah, I mean, it came almost killed myself in college, had a date in the calendar, had a plan, knew exactly how I was going to do it to make it look like an accident. I mean,
How were you gonna do it?
I won't mention it because it's too good and other people will copy it. I've never wanted to discuss it because there are people who are probably watching this who are in pain, and until I give them maybe a glimpse of how I got out, I wouldn't want to give them any blueprint. It's just too risky. I wouldn't want to feel the responsibility for that. But I got really, really lucky. Once again, one of those sliding door moments. If it had been 2 or 3 years later, I wouldn't be here. The reason is I went to Firestone Library at Princeton, where I went undergrad. Funny story, but my guidance counselor in high school was like, you should definitely not apply to Princeton or any hard schools for that matter. We can talk about that if you want, but misaligned incentives. Anyway, got in and was reserving a book on assisted suicide from Firestone Library. But someone else had already taken it out. Some other student was reading it. And I put in a request. So you put in a request with the library, what do? At that point in time, they would mail you a postcard. But I was taking a year away from school at that point. I took a break from undergrad, which is what the school and what a lot of schools will encourage you to do if they think you're having, if you claim any mental duress, because they don't want a suicide on their watch, on their campus, right? It might not help you, but they don't want that as a blemish on their record, so to speak. So the actual postcard got mailed to my parents at home. I'd forgotten to change my mailing address at the registrar's office. So postcard goes to my parents' house and it's like, congratulations, your book is now in on assisted suicide, whatever. Mom called me freaking out and I tap danced and I lied. I was like, oh, it's a friend at Rutgers who couldn't get the book and I was just trying to help him out, but it snapped me, it broke the spell. It snapped me out of it. Because when you're in that much pain, you think nothing can fix it. You think you're fundamentally broken, that you're uniquely flawed. You become so I, me, that all you want is the pain to stop. Anything must be better than this, so let me just close the curtain and turn this show off. And when my mom called, I realized, oh, if I do this, number one, now I can't make it look like an accident. Number two, even if I tried to make it look like an accident, doing what I had planned to do would have been like putting on a suicide bomber vest, walking into a room of all the people I care most about and detonating. Like psychologically, emotionally, that would have been the impact. And so I didn't do it. And quadrupled down on physical training, which is how I ended up going to the nationals for Chinese kickboxing in the US. I was like, you know what? The only thing I know how to do that gets me out of my head is train under imminent threat of being kicked or punched in the face. Like, I am not allowed to daydream under those circumstances. So I'm just going to train hours a day. And that's what I ended up doing. And ultimately everything was fine. Like there were some reasons for me getting as deep into that hole as I did. Not all my fault. And much later, this is probably only 10 years ago, I wrote a post called Some Practical Thoughts on Suicide. And like, if anyone's feeling really dark, like, go read that post. Like, it has saved hundreds of lives, and it doesn't sugarcoat anything. The reason I wrote that is I was at an event in San Francisco at the time, being interviewed on stage. I got off, and a couple of people came over, and there's a small circle around me. They wanted books signed and things like that. And this really nice guy, dressed up in a suit and everything for the event, gave me this book, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I just wanted you to sign this for my brother." And I was like, "Sure, no problem. What would you like me to say to your brother?" And he just kind of froze, and it was like a weird interaction. I couldn't quite figure it out, but I was like, "You know what? I tell you what, let's chat afterwards. You can think about it for a bit. I'll sign it afterwards." And then I went on and interacted with everybody else. And then as I was walking back to the elevator to leave, he joined me, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm really sorry I froze, but my brother killed himself. And my mom has kept his room exactly as it was. And he was such a huge fan of yours. And I just wasn't sure what to put in the book." And ended up signing the book. I gave it to him, and he's like, "Have you ever thought about talking about anything related to mental health?" He's like, "Because my brother listened to you." And I was like, fuck. Okay. And it took me months. I was not committed to publishing it, but I spent months working on this piece, Some Practical Thoughts on Suicide. And then, my parents didn't really know, right? Because I'd lied.
Mm-hmm.
Family didn't know. Best friends didn't know. And,
Yeah, man.
And I certainly, like, it's like the two things that I would say I'm proudest of in terms of publishing, probably if I had to pick two, it'd be the blog post on suicide, right? Some practical thoughts on suicide, and then the podcast during COVID on the childhood abuse, which also, like, parents didn't know about, nobody knew about.
Your parents didn't know about that?
Nobody knew. Because I didn't want them to blame themselves. I had intended to, like, write a book after they passed away, so they wouldn't blame themselves. And then during COVID, right? This is early COVID. People don't know what's coming. Like, it's scary, right? Like, and I remember I had flown to Costa Rica to have some optionality in terms of travel. I was like, all right, let me figure out what's going on here. Like, a friend of mine who works with a lot of hedge fund managers had given me a very early heads up on COVID. And I was like, oh, this is bad. This could be really bad. Let's try to preserve as much optionality as possible. We're leaving now. So I ended up in Costa Rica, and we're sitting there having a meal, and somehow this came up because she knew about it. There were two girlfriends, like long-term girlfriends. Because as I was mentioning earlier, when you're like cauterized and compartmentalized, like, there are a lot of relationship costs. So it works up to a point, and then you hit a wall, and suddenly it doesn't work. And so with these girlfriends who are, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, right? There was a point where I shared with these two women specifically, I guess it was 3 long-term girlfriends, about the abuse. And this one girlfriend, I was talking about writing the book, and she's like, we're sitting in the middle of COVID. She's like, have you ever thought about how many people are going to die of natural or unnatural causes before you ever write that book? Like, it's going to be 10 years, 15 years. She was like, why don't you do a podcast? And I was like, because I don't want to talk to my parents. I don't want to talk to my friends. Like, it's too vulnerable. But ultimately, I had a friend, Debbie Millman, amazing human being, incredible graphic artist, teacher. Design Matters is her podcast. It's been running even longer than mine. And when she came on my show, I had noticed in all my research, she never really talked about her family. And so I asked her before we started recording, I was like, would you be open to talking about your family at all? I've noticed a huge glaring omission. And she was like, maybe. She's like, you can try it. And then if I'm open to it, we'll talk about it. But if not, then not. And we were friends. And we got into it, and she opened up for the first time really publicly about horrifying sexual abuse, like, throughout her entire childhood. And
it's crazy how many kids go through this shit.
Yeah, It's awful. And I mean, the numbers are staggering. Like, it's really high.
Oh, I know.
And
50% of the people that have been on here
yeah,
have talked about it.
yeah,
And then there's another percentage that won't, that will talk about it, but not on camera.
yeah. So it's pervasive. And so I asked Debbie if she would be open to having a conversation with me about how we've both tried to overcome or address this, because she and I took very, very, very different paths and used very different tools. And so we recorded the conversation, and I told her in advance, I was like, look, Debbie, I don't know if I'm going to ever publish this. She was like, that's totally fine. And we recorded it. Eventually I was just like, all right, here goes nothing. And published that, stayed off of all social media. Told my team, I was like, I don't want to see any feedback unless it's from people I care about and it's positive feedback. I was like, it's too raw. Like, I don't want to, internet's a nasty place, right? It's a full contact sport where every fucking village idiot has been given like a halberd and a mace, right? It's not pretty. So I was like, I'm staying off of everything.
But the opposite happened, didn't it?
Well, I ignored everything except the only people who could reach me were my close friends. So what happened? I would say somewhere between 25 and 35% of some of my oldest, closest friends reached out and left me the most heart-wrenching voice memos and voicemails you can imagine about their own abuse that they'd never told anyone about. Fucking horrible. I had anticipated bad behavior on the internet, so I stayed away. I did not expect such a high percentage of my really close friends to confide in me. That was really hard. But I have a lot of, for whatever reason, capacity for like that. With friends, with people I care about, I have a lot of capacity for handling that. So, fuck, man.
How did it feel?
It felt
Get it out there.
and I had to decide in advance what feeling would make it worth it, right? Because no outcome's guaranteed. You have no idea what's going to happen when this thing gets released into the wild. So it was an unburdening for myself, right? Wasn't expecting apologies from anybody. I wasn't expecting a make good. I wasn't expecting any Harry Potter magic spell to do Control Z undo on these experiences. I was exhausted by carrying the weight of that secret around.
Mm-hmm.
And furthermore, I had this very skilled therapist tell me at one point, and maybe she just didn't realize that this would stick. I guess we very seldom realize these little things we might say that actually can make a big difference to people. She said, take the pain and make it part of your medicine. And by taking my own experience and turning it into something hopefully that would help people, it gave it some redemption. It gave it some meaning. Am I glad it happened? No, right? When people say it's like, well, it made me who I am. Fuck that. Like, if I could remove that, I would remove it for sure. The amount of damage that's done is unbelievable.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.